Basically I received Ph.D. in modern and contemporary history, but in nuclear non-proliferation. That's my specific topic. And one more field of my research is BRICS countries, and it was, I believe, thanks to this research that Grace found me on academia. Nevertheless, I decided to make it, of course, more connected with the topic of the arc. We will see in this talk how anthropomorphic and zoomorphic country symbols influence both directly and indirectly, subliminally, including this layer, of course, our perception of the countries. So, Rebecca, would you just please? Okay, thank you very much. So, for starters, we begin with the premise that anthropomorphism and zoomorphism as cultural phenomena of course influence our understanding of the world, and it has always been that way since the formation of our species, I believe. Because this is our way of understanding the world and seeing the phenomena around us, be it natural phenomena, be it representatives of flora, fauna, or those of our kind, you see. So these two things, these two phenomena, influence the formation of our group and individual consciousness, as well as self-identification. And this is basically why I asked you if you need the second questionnaire, because our self-identification is not just a holistic concept. It can comprise a lot of layers. Your social self-identification, ethnic, cultural, religious, and many other layers. But here we speak about belonging to a certain country in different senses, be it, like I said, country of origin or country of residence. So it has really been the case, even with the prehistoric times. And here we move on to tribal totems, which was perhaps the first time when animals and sometimes natural phenomena became certain tribal totems, which made it possible to distinguish us and them that we have been talking about, insiders and outsiders. So you see, this or that person belongs to our group, and he identifies himself or herself with the same tribal totem. This is why it is our person, one of our kind. Otherwise, if you identify yourself with someone else, of course, you belong to a different tribe, which is understandable. And of course, zoomorphic symbols are quite often met in myths and fables. Here you have these two books, such as Aesop fables. Of course, since we are in France, we have to remember La Fontaine, of course. And these myths and fables are intrinsic not only to just one culture, they can be intercultural. And we will talk about this when I will explain several layers of this self-identification. So, continuing this talk, we can talk about personifications of natural phenomena. You see, water comes and water goes. Of course, water can't literally come and go because it has no feet. But this metaphor, used both linguistically and culturally, gives us the right to talk that anthropomorphism and zoomorphism take place in our understanding of the world. And one more phenomenon is attribution of human qualities to animals. You know, a cunning fox, a sly fox, or probably a cowardly rabbit or a cowardly mouse. These human qualities are given to certain animals, and vice versa, of course, as sly as a fox and as cowardly as a mouse, and so on. So this is this can be a reverse process too. Basic features characterizing origin and impact of national anthropomorphic and zoomorphic symbols that comprise our topic of our today's talk can directly or indirectly influence our perception, individual's perception, and collective group perception of a country or a culture. And that is our hypothesis, that is our premise. And what is most important is such misunderstandings can often can often prevent us from communicating in an effective way unfortunately. But there can be also a positive effect, vice versa. Of course, we are focusing here on trying to prevent these misunderstandings. And our key task here, our goal would be, of course, bridging this gap that exists between the traits of a country and features that are represented by a certain country image, country symbol, and stereotypes that appear this way, intrinsic to the collective unconsciousness. Of course, this will not be achieved necessarily today. It is a topic for many, many papers, and a lot of research is still to be done. Unfortunately, there have been not that many papers on this topic, but I will talk about that later. Could you advance it, please? Okay. And I chose this Confucianist name here. Confucius was talking about rectification of names. That is, you have to define what is what definition belongs to this or that term. Unfortunately, in this topic, as there have not been that many papers, there is a lack of uniform terminology. So we need to define what is anthropomorphism or zoomorphism. Is it any kind of animal? Is it any kind of human? And here I define it the following way. Anthropomorphism is ascribing human traits to any other entities, including both living creatures and inanimate objects. Like I said, water comes and water goes, and the stone just rests itself like a human can rest itself. You see, zoomorphism is the same, but referring to animals. So it is usage of animals and animal-like forms to denote a concept or an array of them. So it is basically the same, but it has to do with animals, obviously. Then there is this term phytomorphism. It is not that often met, and I published just one article on this topic that we are talking about, and I used this term, and curiously enough, one of the Australian researchers, Dr. messaged me on academia, and he said that he has never met it before, and asked if it's possible to cite this article, because if you Google it, of course it is there, I mean, in other uses. Nevertheless, I guess it's quite possible and even desirable to use this term in terms of utilization of trees and other plants, could be even mosses, but we deliberately omit this from this research because we are talking about the first two concepts. Nevertheless, phytomorphism is quite often met even on the official symbols of countries like Canada, maple leaf, Slovakia and Slovenia, as we actually know now, where you have linden or lime tree as a national symbol of the country. It can be both official and unofficial, but we will talk about that later. And one more piece in terms of methodology. We will talk about case studies here, and anthropomorphic and zoomorphic country images represent particular cases in this regard. On the whole, it calls for a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach, where we combine different schools of thoughts. Of course, not all of them, since it is impossible. Sometimes they do contradict each other, and they combine achievements of various branches of science. So it can be linguistics, it can be social sciences, political sciences. So we have an intersection of all these several kinds of science. These could be mathematical methods as well, especially of collecting data and processing data in very specialized programs. So let us move on here. Okay, theoretical background. Of course, in the scientific research, there is always this boring part of your thesis or your paper with methodology and theory. So, to begin with, we need to start with crossroads, I believe. Of course, we cannot deprive ourselves of understanding of relevance for understanding of the creationism in the first place, because First, of course, there has been this mythological layer of identity at the beginning. Then it evolved to a religious layer, obviously. And we see it from the representations in art, rock art and cave paintings in the prehistoric times. Then mythology turned into religion. You see there was ancient Eastern mythology, such as Egyptian or Sumerian or many other kinds. And anthropomorphic and zoomorphic symbols, of course, were present there, like Nubian jackals, for example. I guess examples are numerous. Here we talk about primeval consciousness, and it unites primitive scientific knowledge and religious views and mythology, like I said. So, talking about understanding of these primeval concepts, of course we have to refer to works of Emile Durkheim and Claude Lévi-Strauss, which had to do with social psychology and structuralism respectively. And here you see covers of one of the journals and Lévi-Strauss's book on animism and totemism respectively. They were studying these things rather deeply and profoundly. Okay, third, we will have to talk about civilizational approach, which can also be combined here, which can also be used in this combination by Arnold Toynbee and Carl Jaspers. These are, of course, rather recent developments of the 20th century, and it was only then that we started to develop an understanding of this topic. Talking about French, some more French names, we have to refer to the experience of the historians, because in Paris there was l'École des Annales with Lucien Febvre and Marc Bloch. They were developing social-cultural aspect. What is meant by that? These two researchers and their followers, of course, were focusing on everyday life and how this daily life of different times, different periods and different cultures was influencing our understanding of the world, and this material culture, how it actually became possible to learn new things about that and how it can be useful to historians. And one more frame is social constructivism that we can use here. It is quite universal. Can be like social constructionism or social constructivism, doesn't really matter that much. And here you have these two books. Only parts of them deal with our topic. One is by Robert Soldas, Popular Geopolitics and National Braiding in the Post-Soviet Realm, and the other, Paul Bottler, Approaching the New Millennium, an A-Millennium Look at Anno Domini 2000. These, of course, deal with country symbols, but only to some extent, and the first one, of course, deals with this Russian bear symbol or symbols of Ukraine and, you know, countries of Central Asia, for example. And one more framework that I am utilizing currently is a semiotic approach. Semiotic approach basically has to do with symbols and signs, which is the core, at the core of semiotics on the whole. And here I refer to the Argentinian researcher, Argentinian writer Ponce, who published a paper in an Estonian journal of semiotics in 2016. And the name of this paper is quite curious, Human as a Predator. And it has to do with ecology too, because even though we are omnivores, like we were discussing with Garbo, still we act as predators, eliminating other species of animals, plants, and other living creatures. On the whole, we see that synthesizing social sciences and humanities here, and it is a Russian approach that I have been talking about. Of course, it has to be done very carefully, so as not to truncate the data and the approaches. Well, it can be used to some extent, I believe. Of course, we do not have to mix them, like I said, fully, but to some extent this would be quite natural and quite useful. So, now moving to several layers that I was talking about, In terms of anthropomorphic and zoomorphic symbols, there is no such information on the slide yet. These are my recent thoughts. First, we have the global layer, because an animal can be universally attributed with one quality, or the same with anthropomorphic figures. In all cultures, a predator can be strong and aggressive. On the other hand, there is a layer of ethnic groups, for example, Celtic and Turkish groups, because deer has played a substantial role in the world understanding, this German word, Weltanschauung of the Turkic tribes. The same can be said of Slavic tribes, for example, and it can still remain the same. So there are these, territorial areas where a certain animal can be used as a tribal totem, or in the future it has developed into a national symbol. Okay, the third layer is country level, and we will talk about that a little bit later with case studies. And finally, local communities. So before it had to do with local tribes and totemism, but right now there is local layer in identity of people. For example, within France, in Alsace or in Paris, someone can identify themselves with a certain animal or an anthropomorphic figure. At the same time, in Russia, in Caucasus, people often identify themselves with wolves, curiously enough. All right, enough with theory. I guess we will go to case studies. Okay, thank you. Zoomorphic country shapes on maps. This is a very curious research. It was conducted by... Yes. Exactly. It's much more fun like this. So, it is a study conducted by Rebecca Maxwell from the website geolaunch.com, and as you see, she basically deals with these depictions of zoomorphic country symbols defined by borders, as you see here. Mostly these are maps from the 18th and 19th century, mostly 19th, as we will see later. Originally these maps were developed in Europe, and you see that both of these maps have French inscriptions. Nevertheless, in this study, Rebecca Maxwell shows that there are some more maps in the US, but these were difficult times for the United States in terms of civil war and how one state within the US understood another state, for example. And there were some more maps, but I decided to stay on this country level, nevertheless, state level. Analyzing these maps, we can see that these symbolic animals are often depicted with these borders, as you see. So there is obviously a bear on this Kola Peninsula. It represents Russia. Curiously enough, it has to do with the northern part of Russia, even though, of course, Russia was bigger back then. Horse, on the other hand, is represented as a Sikh horse. Turkey represented as a Sikh horse. France is represented as a rooster. Austro-Hungarian Empire is an owl. It's always a bird of prey, curiously enough. The same has to do with Germany, because there were some more maps where Germany was depicted as an eagle, and it is obviously one of the national symbols for Germany. It, of course, acts as a means of propaganda to show that some countries are predators, are trying to bite at other countries, you see, and maybe expand at such expense of it.
Is that a carrot?
Where exactly?
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, most likely. Mm-hmm. Probably it has to do. Actually, I never noticed this, but yeah, before. So a phytomorphic symbol.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting.
It's a parrot, did you say?
Carrot.
Carrot. From here.
Oh.
Weird stuff.
It's like a coconut with pop.
Maybe a hot pepper.
Yes, and even in the 20th century, this approach has been adopted and has been applied by caricaturists and cartoonists in comic strips in the 20th century, and even now. For example, Rebecca Maxwell analyzes one more map where Korea, as one Korea, unified Korea, is represented as a tiger because the whole Korean peninsula looks like a tiger, and it has been used as a means of propaganda for Korean unification. Okay, probably next slide, please. Okay, thank you. And now we will talk about how this can be applied practically, because so far it has been purely theory and not that exciting at all. I can think of several ways here. So, first one is creating or constructing a national image, that is country branding, both within the country, for the dwellers of this country, or abroad, to see how this or that country represents itself on the international arena. On the other hand, these can be official symbols, even flags and coats of arms. Here you have, of course, Australian coat of arms with emu and kangaroo, an Albanian flag with double-headed eagle. And eagle has been used extensively in European cultures, like I said, in Germany, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it is a coat of arms of the Russian Federation too. Country branding, on the other hand, doesn't have to do with official symbols, because official symbols and official narrative is just one of the layers. And this doesn't mean, of course, that Russia should adopt a bear as an official symbol, of course. Or Britain doesn't have a lion on its flag, for example. This has to do with merchandise of all kinds, including sports mascots and self-expression for the representatives of these countries. You know, at the airport you meet a lot of people wearing these t-shirts and other clothes that have these symbols depicted on them. And this has to do with shaping or reshaping perception. We will see with China how this acts, because a dragon has always been used as a symbol in China, but now it's a little bit different because of these connotations that we have in the Western culture associated with the dragon. And this is all about demonstrating socially accepted behavior, and Petra was talking about that when speaking of cults, because you want to fit in, obviously, into a group. And this is how you demonstrate your belonging, your sense of unity with this group. And getting back to the previous one, talking about local layers, it can also be important, but within this country, where you have, for example, Californians wearing merchandise with a bear because it's one of the symbols of this state, or, like I said, people from the Far East wearing T-shirts with the depiction of a tiger, because tiger is associated with the Far East, for example, within Russia. And it's a very interesting layer, and it represents a whole lot of material for further study. But of course, it will be a little bit more local, more narrow, narrower nevertheless. The third use that I can think of is the use of metaphors in political discourse for the sake of emphasis and appealing to electorate. I was listening to a recording of congressional hearings, I believe that's what it's called in the US the other day, for my other research in nuclear non-proliferation, and there was this Republican lady who was talking about, quote, Iron Bear marching, unquote. And of course, these connotations cannot be positive, obviously. It has to do with aggression of a certain country. You can guess.
Where could that be?
All right. And it's not necessarily used by the politicians, such as I had the example of Sarah Palin using the image of Uncle Sam in one of her, not the image, but this word combination Uncle Sam in one of her speeches when talking about Obama, if I'm not mistaken. So it can be used by journalists as well as a means of propaganda. Before we saw these visual images, right? Such as maps and so on, caricatures. Here you have a word combination or a phrase. And it has both positive, it can have both positive and negative connotations, and sometimes these animal names can act as ethnic slurs. Well, I will not give you any examples, okay, but it's possible to think of some. Okay, and the fourth thing that comes to my mind here, zoomorphic and anthropomorphic images can sporadically influence a country's position on the international arena and its foreign policy. Of course, this is connected rather with the first part, with the official symbols, where you have this proud bird of prey spreading its wings, or we can talk about plunder diplomacy, but in terms of case studies, I will talk about China a little bit later, and that shows 5 countries. Unfortunately, it's impossible to talk about all of 193 countries that there are under the auspices of the United Nations, and I had to prioritize some of the countries. I'm really sorry if your country is not here, but we will talk about it. Yeah, because we will have a room for discussion, like I said. Okay, next slide, please. So, to begin with case studies, I'm sure that people from the Great Britain know this pretty well, and if I make any mistakes, feel free to correct me, because sometimes information, even in these proofread books, cannot be that accurate, or if I mispronounce something. All right, British line. This image, as we see, has been in extensive use since the 12th century, and it has to do with Richard the Lionheart, Coeur de Lion. So it's the 20th century, 12th century, of course, and it is said that he was the first one to use this image on his battle shield with 3 heraldic lions. And he, of course, is rather famous for his bravery and fearlessness, and this is the basic connotation associated with lions here. Even though in the modern times lions can hardly be met in natural habitat in Great Britain, it has to do with royal menageries, even from the earlier times, earlier than the 12th century, and lions were kept there, and this became one of the symbols of monarchy, of the kings, and it has become widely associated with the British traditions too. And we will see how this influences the perception by the general public. Okay, like I said about merchandise, sometimes it has to do with sports. And talking about football, 3 lions have been used as one of the symbols of the national football team in Great Britain. And then there was this championship, I believe, World Championship in football in 1966, right? And this was the first time when 3 lions were used as one of such images. And then there was a song in 1996 written that also comprised this lion image. Nevertheless, at first it was both for British, both for dwellers of Britain and dwellers of colonies too. In mid-20th century, we are talking about decolonization and dissolution of the British Empire, which obviously influenced the perception of the country. It is not that aggressive and extensive anymore. And the Russian political discourse, especially in the media, mostly official propaganda media, let's put it this way, different breeds of dogs became used as a depiction for Great Britain, such as British Poodle, for example, to somehow make the connotation a little bit not that aggressive, and even sometimes I would even say not that serious. As for the perception within the country, The Guardian conducted one of the surveys, and it turned out that the British themselves associate lions with strength, courage, dignity, and pride. These are the main attributes for lion as a symbol of the British Empire, now the United Kingdom. And as for other connotations, it has to do with conventions and customs. But even though I was talking about decolonization, in some of the former colonies of Great Britain, such as Hong Kong, for example, lion still remains one of the symbols, and it is there on the coats of arms of Hong Kong, together with the dragon. So you see, it is an official symbol. Okay, next slide, please. Now, a case studies of Chinese dragon / panda, and here we have an ambiguity. Of course, I could talk about Britannia, talking about the United Kingdom, but talking about zoomorphic symbols with China, we associate either dragon or panda with China. First, let us talk about the dragon. And origin lies deep within the Chinese mythology and philosophy of Taoism and Confucianism, and it has originally served as an explanation of the emperor's power. And if you see all of these narratives and origination of this character, this one, it's said to be one of the most ancient characters that is met even before, way before the modern Hangzi, the modern Chinese characters were developed. And it lies, like I said, deep within mythology, and Liu Bang, one of the ancient emperors of China, was said to conceive by a dragon. And it is quite interesting that depiction of a dragon differs substantially from that of a dragon in Western culture, because in Western culture it is rather associated with fire. It is an aggressive, fire-breathing creature, four-legged creature too, and in China it is usually a snake rather than a four-legged creature. And we see that in, for example, Western culture, dragon also plays an important role, and of course it differs substantially from that of Chinese dragon. In Chinese culture, dragon is more associated with water and rain, and it has a much deeper symbolic meaning, a meaning of purification. It is also a symbol of power and luck. So first depictions were there already during the Neolithic period, and it is connected with spirituality, like I said, power and luck, and probably all of dynasties such as Tang, Qin, Yuan, Han have this depiction of a dragon. Some of them have these motifs on their clothing, emperor's clothing. And analyzing dragon image on the whole, we can say that it's mostly outward oriented, that is less commonly used in China. And interestingly enough, people within China do not think of themselves that the dragon is something that unites them. But in the 1970s, when the Chinese communities began organizing themselves actively in different countries, such as the US, for example, they chose a very interesting phrase for themselves to, to somehow distinguish themselves from the others, descendants of the dragon. This word Guatiao means Chinese living abroad. And it's interesting that the Chinese are much more likely to gather into communities within other countries than, for example, Russians. So it is just one side of the medal, of the coin, and because of this discrepancy in understanding of the dragon in Western culture and the Chinese culture, we see that dragon is represented and depicted as an aggressive animal, mythological animal in the Western culture. This is why this misunderstanding often occurs. Misunderstanding of China, the image of China and the Chinese people. This is why in the late 20th century the Chinese suddenly remembered another symbol of themselves, pandas, which is universally associated with China, of course. So pandas have been used as a symbol since Suzhou dynasty. As you see, this was even before Christ, and even though they are seen as godly animals, you see, they are associated with invincibility, and it's interesting that black color and white color that there is in their palette somehow reminds of yin and yang, and this has also to do, of course, with the Chinese traditions and Chinese understanding of the world. The Chinese began utilizing this symbol rather extensively in 1950s in terms of niche diplomacy. This is a very interesting branch of civil diplomacy. They were sending pandas to Zeus as gifts to establish better relations with a certain country, and it was considered to be a great honor to receive a panda in one's zoo. And talking about history, getting back a little bit, Empress Wu Zetian actually is said to be the first person in the world who applied this type of niche diplomacy, sending a panda to a menagerie of one of Mongol cats. Okay, and as we see, there are two symbols, and we can say that this duality influences understanding of China and the Chinese people, Chinese diaspora throughout the world. Openness and friendliness depicted by a panda versus power and resilience depicted by the dragon and impersonated by a dragon. And there is one more example of that in 2008, when the Olympic Games took place in Beijing, China. They had a special committee for choosing a symbol, a national symbol. First, it had to be a dragon, but then, because of this discrepancy and understanding by the West, it wasn't chosen, interestingly enough. All right, could you please advance? Okay, Gallic rooster and Korean. So, all la liberté. There is once again this dichotomy, but this time it's not aggressive versus cuddly. It's a zoomorphic symbol versus an anthropomorphic figure. So let us speak about rooster at first. So origin, why actually rooster came to be a symbol of France is rather controversial. So there are different theories, as we see. The coin theory, because once rooster during the times of French Revolution was depicted on one of the official coins in 1792. One more theory is religious theory. It has been a symbol of hope and faith in beliefs of the Gauls, and then it actually was the same in Christianity. And there is one more theory called resemblance theory, because of hairstyles. You see, Gauls were universally depicted having these mohawks in some of the cultures, but it is a rather weird theory in my opinion. So you see, probably it has to do with the religious theory mostly, but we may never know. Still, these are theories, and we are only hypothesizing and whatnot. And there's one more interesting thing that Gaulos in Latin means both an ethnonym for these Gallic tribes and the notion of the species. And it was Suetonius, one of the Latin historians, who paid attention to such a thing. It is a homonym, obviously. So, talking about roosters, we can see that it mostly depicts, it mostly has to do with traditions, and first it was a tribalist, tribal symbol, then it was a royalist symbol, and we can also see this dichotomy within this symbol, pagan versus Christian. So at first it was used by in paganism, local beliefs, and then it grew to be a Christian symbol. Now, Marianne, or La Liberté. So, it has been in extensive use since Renaissance as a feature of activity. Now you can meet it in town halls and law courts, and in Paris, of course, there are statues of Marianne. Originally, it was a term coined, not a term coined, but a name used Maurice Agulon, one of the French historians, was the one conducting research on Marianne, and he found this connection between the liberty and this name Marianne, and it has been widely represented in culture by Eugène Delacroix. You see this picture here, liberty leading the people, and the Statue of Liberty is also one of the images, curiously enough. Of course, you know about these tight connections between the US and France that existed in the 19th century. Okay, both symbols are still used officially. Great seal coins, medals, stamps, and so on. During the World Cup, as one of the official symbols of France, one of the mascots in 1998. It is widely used as a metaphor in media, scholarly, and political discourse, but like any other symbol, obviously. And there is one more thing to mention. Rooster was originally a pun, according to one of the theories, to make fun of Gauls, and it has to do with this resemblance theory. But French didn't really mind and chose rooster as one of their symbols. Okay, next one. So, Russian bear. Originally, the Russian name of it is a euphemism, and we may never know what kind of name is the original name in the Slavic languages for bear. It's technically someone who knows where honey is. Yes, it is this way. Medved, med is honey, ved is someone who knows something. Yeah. So theories are quite different here. One of the Russian researchers, Kristallov, says that it has been used even since 16th century. One more researcher, Boris Rybakov, one of the most famous historians in Russia, says that it has been there since ancient history, since not since prehistoric times, but since the times when Slavic tribes began to organize themselves into first states. So, the most universal version is as follows. Bear has been in wide use as a symbol of Russia since late 18th century. Why exactly bear? We can talk about special attitude of the East Slavs to bear as a forest keeper, namely, of course, a brown bear. Still, in Russian tales and in Russian folklore, bear is not deprived of negative qualities, namely laziness, greed, and so on. And we will talk about how Russians see bear as a symbol of Russia a little bit later. But universally, as a symbol of Russia outside Russia, it has become used during the times of the Great Game in European discourse, where there were these geopolitical tensions around Afghanistan between the UK and the Russian Empire, and cartoonists from the UK, of course, utilized this image as one way to depict Russia as a bear. The same occurred in the 20th century during the Cold War, but of course mostly in the United States. So the image goes global in that regard, and you see that this is how it is used in geopolitics mostly. The same case as with China. Russia had numerous attempts to influence the narrative, because bear is, of course, associated with something strong and aggressive. And in 1980, during the Olympic Games, of course, they chose the symbol of bear for the not for the Soviet Union, but as a mascot for the Olympics. And it wasn't, of course, that aggressive. It was a bear cub. Here it's depicted on top of the screen, and they chose a diminutive to name him Misha. It's a diminutive from a Russian name Mikhail, and Mikhail is the name used often met in connection with the bear. Even though original semantics is a little bit different, it is not a Russian name originally. So it has been used abroad in the first place, not within Russia, but in the 20th century during the Cold War and counter-propaganda that the Soviets were trying to lead. Bear was one more term, one more way to unite the Russian people within the Soviet Union, the Soviet people, of course. We can also say about recognizability or brand awareness, because it is a widely recognized symbol of Russia, both within Russia and abroad. And here, unfortunately, you have only one line, but I will tell you that by Russians and Americans it's seen differently. Therefore, we have different semantics and collocations here. American respondents in Washington, namely, chose predominantly such quality as aggressiveness as a marker, whereas Russians in Moscow chose laziness instead of aggressiveness. So you see, these qualities are seen in a little bit different way. Okay, and we have one more symbol and then conclusion. Okay, thank you. And last but not least, Uncle Sam. So, it has been in wide use since late 18th century in the song Yankee Doodle, and it is these are two ways to see what this abbreviation stands for, either United States or Uncle Sam, and this, as you know, is the one of the sources of origin. In one of the articles I met, 1813 was named as the year of birth, and in another theory, Uncle Sam was used in this title, The Adventures of Uncle Sam, in search after his lost owner in 1816. And we can also see a real prototype of this anthropomorphic symbol. It is said to be Samuel Wilson, a rations packer and meat packer during the 1812 war, and the political cartoonist Thomas Nast, who is also famous for creating the image of Santa Claus, created this image of Uncle Sam too, wearing this top hat, wearing clothes with blue, white and red colors. So, but of course one of the most popular posters is here, is the First World War poster, I went you to the US Army. So Uncle Sam depicts not only country but also the government, and here we can see, like with the previous symbols, a lot of aspects. Predominantly I would like to talk about military aspect, because Uncle Sam, and economic aspect too, because Uncle Sam is said to be a depiction of US aggressiveness and imperialism, and it has been used by both allies and adversaries in European discourse, for example, and of course in Soviet discourse as well. So it has been used in politician speeches such as Sarah Palin, and in media, and as a metaphor in political science. And there is, like with Britain, one more symbol, a zoomorphic, this time a bull-headed eagle, and unlike Uncle Sam, it is used officially, as you know, for example, on state seals. And conclusion finally. And here we can talk about our findings. From the semiotics point of view, the idea of humanization of certain qualities and attributes is here, and this is one of the semiotic laws which Yuri Lotman, one of the Russian specialists in semiotics, was talking about. Interconnection between a country image and its perception by the public at large obviously exists, and it has to be. We have to take to pay close attention to it when talking about country branding, and there is still a possibility of changing implicitly other people's feelings towards a nation. And as a practical, probably practical meaning of this research, of course, it is not possible to do this at once, but at least now we see this need to bridge this gap between the stereotypes and the reality, as in case with China, for example, but it is the case with all these countries and the countries that I haven't spoken about. Country branding, well, I've been talking about it, that it is sometimes used as a means of propaganda and often manipulating other people's perception of the country. And there are different levels of perception. And one of them is an expert level, and there is so-called average level, and finally mundane level, understanding of the image by public in general. And we can say about existence of stereotypes that have to do with this or that image, and these stereotypes are unfortunately often negative ones, and we need to overcome it. So, some more findings. In many cases, as you see, if it is a zoomorphic image, it is a predator most often, and there is this intrinsic sense of animosity which exists and which you have towards a representative of a certain country in connection with this image. Of course, it is not often the case, but it might as well be, as with the Russian bear, when we talk about aggressiveness, chosen as a marker by the Americans in Washington. Depiction in popular culture and merchandise. Well, this has to do with more practical application, and I have been talking about it as a soft power tool. So this can be used in gender diplomacy, as a niche diplomacy, for instance. And in spite of this efficiency of combining different approaches and different theories and schools of thought, we can see its efficiency, and nevertheless we still need to polish the combination of these approaches. And of course there remains this room for future investigation. Thank you very much. So please feel free to ask any questions or probably your comments. And
I just have a question about how do these images affect? Do you think they affect decision making? So your other research about nuclear proliferation, do you think this affects, the idea that Russia has lots of weapons or needs more weapons because they've got this symbol? How do you think it affects decision making?
Well, I think it has to do most of all with a reverse process when there is decision making in terms of that Russia is the enemy, for example, on a lot of levels. This is how you need to probably substantiate your point of view that Russia is an enemy. You have to depict it as an aggressive power which is trying to influence more and more countries, and you need to choose an aggressive image for that matter. And as for decision making, except for this kind of diplomacy, we can refer to the example of China, where you had to make a decision between either dragon or any other symbol during the Olympics as a mascot. And they didn't choose dragon, obviously, because it has these negative connotations in Western culture.
Yeah, it also was quite funny because when I wrote about England, I didn't write about Britain. I forgot about that lion thing. When it came on, I was like, oh, what's that? I'd written about England and written about the dragon. Because in the English flag, it's a dragon. And I wrote some of the qualities, the negative qualities that you said that people wrote about China, about England. So it's quite interesting, the overlaps.
The dragon
did you
well.
write?
Isn't the dragon well?
Is it well?
Yeah.
Oh, is it alright? George the dragon.
I think it's Welsh, isn't it?
Okay, I'm Welsh.
You know, there can be this ambiguity. There can be this ambiguity because when I was reading about Scottish symbol, for example, in one sources it is said that it's unicorn. In other sources it was a lion too. So it's
I think it's unicorn. I think it's unicorn.
unicorn.
So they're always trying to join them together with the rose and the thistle. So the thistle's the Scottish one. The rose.
What? Sorry, I can't hear you. So it's just
So just like trying to create diplomacy between two countries, like England and Scotland, they're kind of they've both got these beautiful kind of vicious flowers, the rose and the thistle. But they often show them joined together as well as with the lion and the unicorn.
To show the unity.
Yeah, to show the unity.
Of the two territories.
I think it's interesting, sort of going along with that, what the outside perception is about the symbols and what the perception of the people in the country have about the symbols. And for example, so when I did my survey, I wrote all about the bald eagle, and then when you talked about the U.S., you talked about Uncle Sam. Of course, I know that Uncle Sam is one of the depictions of the U.S., but it's not the one that I think about, and it's not the one that seems to me to be most primary. And then I spent a lot of time in France, but I had no idea the Gallic rooster was a part of their imagery, because within France you see the statues like in Place de la République, it's Mariana, right? So the Statue of Liberty was a gift to the US. So I found it really interesting and trying to think about, like, I'm sure people who are French knew that the rooster was part of their imagery. But I never think of Uncle Sam as like the external image of the US, but I do think of the eagle.
Okay, well, in Russia it is mostly Uncle Sam,
Wow.
curiously enough, and this is precisely why I decided to do the survey first, to offer you the survey first, so as not to influence in any way
Yeah.
your ideas, your decisions, what's right in this questionnaire papers.
Yeah, but first, tell me what you
Yeah.
No, I was just showing you that because I have an old coin as a ring, and inside there is a rooster, and outside there is a lion.
Okay, so it's both images actually.
Yeah. And how old is that coin? It's very old.
It's from Napoleon III.
Well, Julius Caesar wrote the memoir of the War of the in Spanish it's called the memory, something like the memory of the wars in the Las Gallias, yeah? That was when he was coming here and fighting Vercingetorix, the leader who was fighting Julius Caesar here. Vercingetorix or whatever, but in Italian, the rooster during the war of conquest, yeah, the Romans trying to take France and finally taking it, they were called Los Gallos, the roosters, though something related to the gallo in Spanish, rooster. So it is apparently something much more older, because Julius Caesar was not very not precisely an original guy, you know.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for this information.
I have one other comment and two questions. The comment is, fortunately for conservation biology, most of those animals making people proud are large animals, top predators. That means they need a wild area for surviving. And a strategy developed by conservation biologists is using those animals in order to make propaganda towards wildlife conservation. If you take care of the tiger, for example, you are protecting a very large area of forest and so on. So you get a world habitat, and many animals living in there are going to be protected too. It was an issue. It has been an issue in conservation biology meetings and so on, and trying to define, okay, what kind of strategy do we get? Unfortunately, one was that, okay, many countries have top predators, large animals as symbols, so let's use these symbols. Probably we shouldn't tell it to the rest of the world. The questions, what do you think about lands pretending to be something? Panama uses the harpy eagle, which is the biggest raptor in the world. You know, we are a tiny little country. We are not an empire, all right? And in many Latin American countries, in South America, particularly the ones liberated by Simón Bolívar, use the condor. The condor is a vulture. It is not once again, it doesn't eat precisely the most, elegant food. Have you developed some idea about lands pretending something or using the wrong animal as a symbol?
First, to defend yourself, to protect yourself, and to attack another countries, you need to have weapons. And maybe it's a metaphor of these claws and beaks as weapons.
Huh.
Well, it might be one idea.
I think so, because in the army we use it in Panama, the harpy eagle. There is a tree called the Panama tree. They never take the tree. They got the eagle. The other question is, I am very, very interested in minorities. In Catalonia, for example, they use a star, and they had it in a flag. Yeah, one single star. In Puerto Rico, you find the same, with the actual current flag they are using and the original one when they started trying to get independent. As far as I know, minority groups never use an animal or something like that. They use something else.
Okay, that's an interesting question. But in Russia, it is the case for Caucasus, like I said. They associate themselves with wolves. For example, Chechens do that all the time. And you see a lot of, we don't have a lot of Chechens in Siberia, obviously, but when I come to some events where there are people from the whole country, Chechens almost always wear these t-shirts with the wolves. Dagestanis, it's the case for them too, but they wear mostly not wolves, but they have eagle as a depiction to depict the small region within Russia and to show their pride. So this is the local layer I've been talking about.
And didn't the Nazis, they used the bird in there
as well, but I guess it is the case for modern Germany too, because they still have eagle as coat of arms, if I'm not mistaken. Stars, sure, yes, and it's one of the most widespread symbols, not only throughout Europe but in the world. Like you said, these birds of prey in Latin America.
Have you noticed a difference between, I know we didn't talk about it much in here, but countries that use plants primarily as their symbol versus those that use animals, and how we maybe perceive them, like Canada as an example?
Yes, Canada is an example.
Yeah.
And curiously enough, these countries often have a peaceful more peaceful stance in terms of international politics, but we need to consider this a little bit more deeply in order to see whether it's a coincidence or it is something that is a trend.
Because Canada would have a national symbol, an animal, wouldn't it?
I don't think
a
so.
bear? No?
Maple leaf?
It's just the maple leaf.
I bet you there's an
Yeah,
animal.
it must be.
There has
There's so
yeah.
many animals.
I mean, it's just like there's no animal on the planet.
Yeah.
In the States, it's just stars.
Canada has a nice animal if they have one.
Yeah, a
They
lot
have
of
like a moose or something. Like
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, Canadian
Yeah.
moose. Yeah, that's it. Which actually is aggressive.
Yeah,
It's super scary.
It's funny because in all of those countries you see those animals, but in the English one you won't see a lion.
But
So then it's like a
there were lions
representation of
on
our
the European
colonial
continent.
history of going off and taking things.
I was thinking about that, and there was one explanation I can think of. Probably it has to do with Ice Age times, where the mountain lions were there. Probably.
We have had lions.
Probably.
But it's not to do with their colonial approach of going to South Africa where there are lions.
And taking it.
It's
And then
disconnected.
thinking, bring it like that. They're not taking them back, but I mean, the strength, conquering a land that has lions means that you have the lion in you, something.
It is connected, I believe. And I have a question for you guys. Why do you think I chose these 5 countries?
Oh, sorry.
They are in the, how to say, Security Council in the United Nations, I think.
That's a good point. Yes, these countries are said to be countries forming the future of the world so far, although, you know, there has been a lot of talk about reforming the Security Council and its permanent representatives of the Security Council. Yes, and curiously enough, these are 5 official states having nuclear weapons. Of course, you have India and the DPRK and Pakistan and Israel, presumably, and these are not official countries. They are out of the non-proliferation treaty, and they're kind of violating this international law in terms of that. But I would be glad to choose any more countries for my research and to go a little bit deeper, because this is, of course, rather superficial still. I was trying to make some more conclusions. For example, in terms of gender theory, and we can see that if there is an animal, it's most likely a male somehow.
No, but I like Marianne.
Marianne?
I will have made such a revolution with
Have your roots influenced your costume for your performance?
Obviously. Come on.
Subliminally, probably, but on this, you know, subconscious level, I believe, because it is, of course, a California event. So, I'm representing the US, and this is what the arc is about, I believe.
I've got a question. What about like someone like New Germany? So you know the rebranding of Germany after the World Cup, and you know this new Germany, and how that symbol of the eagle, whatever, didn't come back because it's so associated with Nazis and blah blah blah. So it seems that you can take your symbol away, and you don't need to have a symbol. You know, and therefore we should think, what animal would represent the art, or is it going to have to be all the animals? You know, and last question to everyone about tomorrow when we go out. You know, this thing about stereotypes. You know, will people have stereotypes about our animals or about us, or I don't know. I think it's quite funny, interesting to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And as for Nazi Germany, I think I will have to do some research about it, because it's interesting that, of course, the symbol is still there as far as I can see it, because when I was in Germany, I saw it on the flags. I mean, these 3 traditional colors of German flag, black, yellow, red, if I'm not mistaken. And on these three stripes there is a German, a black German on a white background. So it's not a Nazi, of course, because the shape is absolutely different, completely different, but still it is country rebranding, and that's a good scope for further research, for further investigation.
Well, after 10 years living there and an integration course, they teach us, the immigrants, something about it. The eagle changed. They kept the eagle, but as you see, the eagle became slim, you know, less young. It says something. It says something. Yeah. It was after World War II. So they learned something from history. And the flag, they kept this flag because this is the most progressive symbol they found as a flag, I mean, throughout their history. It comes from 1848, something like that, where the liberals were trying to make revolutions and so on in a very democratic way. So they really preferred that flag instead of others. That's roughly what I know. So it was a really top-down method, like everything in Germany, but also reshuffling themselves and remaking an ideology and trying to keep this remade ideology by means of these symbols. It was conscious, very explicit. They were really thinking about it.
When they redesigned the Reichstag, there was a lot of discussion about how the eagle should look, whether it should be, how sleek it should be, or how kind of plump it should be. And they pushed it to become plumper, was my understanding. Norman Foster wanted a sleek one, and they were like...
There was an evolution. There was a kind of evolution there. The only, large one looking not so, thin, how to say, sick perhaps, is the one in the Reichstag, in the parliament. But it looks very fat. It looks really, you see that and you say, how the heck does it fly? So, but there was an evolution. They were shaping it and reshaping it and so on, and you can effectively have the different versions. Throughout history.
It's like maybe you can choose like a symbolic one for the country, but then every time you picture it, like every time you sort of depict it in like cartoon or like maybe more visual things, there will have individual like kind of look to the characters.
Depending on the meaning of the message.
Yeah. It's always like an Aubervilliers.
Yeah, another way of communication.
Okay, thank you very much for fulfilling the survey, because I will conduct some data analysis, qualitative and quantitative. Yes, thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.